got a copy of this, and I really appreciate, again, everybody joining me tonight. I'm gonna, we have a bunch of stuff to share on the share screen tonight, but I'm gonna keep trying to come back out of shared screen because I found out something that I really don't like about Zoom, and maybe somebody here can tell me a way around this issue. But whenever I'm sharing a screen, I can't tell if somebody is waiting in the Zoom waiting room for me to admit them in. And so, like right now, I can see who's checked in. I can see if you've got your audio turned on, if you got your video turned on, and I can tell if anybody's waiting to be admitted in. And Zoom, had this issue with people breaking into Zoom meetings back at the beginning of COVID. And so they really tightened down to make sure that people had to be specifically allowed in by the host and could not just, crash into a Zoom meeting by themselves. Well, the result is if I'm sharing with you a shared screen where we're on that for a while, last week, Sunday, Cheryl Rios was trying to get my attention, and I never knew it. I didn't know it until after the event. So, all right.
Would it make any difference if you made somebody a co-host? Because I don't know whether the co-host can see or not.
Well, we could try that and see. Does this mean you're volunteering to be co-host?
Well, I've never been co-host, but I've seen a lot of smart people use various and sundry functions. So, sorry.
Oh, that's quite musical.
Okay, so you are now a co-host, so we'll see what you end up seeing on your screen.
I'll let you know, because if the co-host can admit people, right?
So I think so.
So I'll tell you whether I can, see that sidebar thing where.
Okay, that sounds great. Well, I'd like to start us out with another psalm reading. I've really enjoyed that being a way to have an opening prayer that's actually by us hearing and having somebody read a section of scripture. And this is Psalm 145, the first 9 verses. Would someone be willing to read it for me? I read the whole thing and I'll put it on the screen. Do I have a reader? David raised his hand. I saw that.
Everybody else stepped back.
Okay, so for everybody else, if you could, sit back and listen to it or read along with it silently while David's reading it out loud, so we can get a sense for what is being conveyed in this psalm. So I'll go ahead and get it on here. Let me see where it is. Here it is.
What was the number again?
145.
Okay. Yeah.
I will extol you, my God and King, and bless your name forever and ever. Every day I will bless you and praise your name forever and ever. Great is the Lord, and greatly to be praised. His greatness is unsearchable. One generation shall laud your works to another, and shall declare your mighty acts. On the glorious splendor of your majesty, and on your wondrous works, I will meditate. The might of your awesome deeds shall be proclaimed, and I will declare your greatness. They shall celebrate the fame of your abundant goodness.
Mom,
and shall sing aloud of your righteousness.
I'm gonna go out, okay?
The Lord is gracious and merciful, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love. The Lord is good to all, and his compassion is over all that he has made. Amen.
Amen.
Yeah.
Okay. So in this fourth chapter, this last chapter of this long, long book of the Bible, we end up having three questions that we end up being able to spend time reviewing. And there is one question, whether Jonah is right to be angry at God's mercy towards Nineveh. Another is Jonah right to be angry about what happens with the plant or the tree, whatever translation. Yeah. And is God right to be concerned about Nineveh? So those are the three questions we're going to be tackling in what we go over tonight. And a place we're going to start that is to actually look at a parable of Jesus, or actually a phrase, a passage that comes from Matthew, the parable of the workers in the vineyard. And so I'm going to share that. And so far, I don't see anybody trying to check in. So I think it's safe for me to go over to this. But I'd like to have someone read this passage from Matthew. So do I have any volunteers to read? Carol, do we have a volunteer, Carol?
Okay, I can read it,
Okay.
I hope.
Yeah,
Are you going to put it up on the board?
Yeah, I'm working on it. I'm trying to put the right one up here. Yeah. So is this being blocked by anybody, for anybody with the pictures on the side? Because that came up one or two classes ago, and you can click on the top of that box and drag it around so you can move it. There are also some icons along the top, so there are different ways that you can display that window. So one of them that I've ended up seeing used a lot is it just shows a icon of just the speaker. And another one, let's see, shows a thumbnail video of us, and then there's a big grid that shows everybody. So anyways, if you just do the one that is of the speaker, at least while we're in these little shared screen sessions, it only takes up a very little bit of space. So that might be a way to just help you not have your view obstructed. So okay, is this big enough print, Carol, so it's easy to read?
Yes, yes.
Okay, and I'd like you to read this whole Matthew passage. So it goes down here to verse 15. So I'm going to scroll on you here partway.
Okay,
All right.
okay. For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire workers in his vineyard. He agreed to pay them a denarius for the day and sent them to his vineyard. About 9 a.m, he went out and saw others standing in the marketplace doing nothing. He told them, "You also go and work in my vineyard, and I will pay you whatever is right." So they went. He went out again at noon and about 3 p.m. and did the same thing. About 5 p.m, he went out and found still others standing around, and he asked them, "Why have you been standing here all day long doing nothing?" "Because no one has hired us," they answered. He said to them, "You also go and work in my vineyard." When the evening came, the owner of the vineyard called to his foreman, "Call the workers and pay them their wage, beginning with the last ones hired and going on to the first." The workers who were hired about 5 p.m. came, and each received a denarius. So when those came who were hired first, they expected to receive more. But each one of them also received a denarius. When they received it, they began to grumble against the landlord. These who were hired last worked only 1 hour, they said, and you have made them equal to us who have borne the burden of the work and the heat of the day. But he answered one of them, I am not being unfair to you, friend. Didn't you agree to work for a denarius? Take your pay and go. I want to give the one who was hired last the same as I gave you. Don't I have the right to do what I want with my own money? Or are you envious because I am generous?
Okay. So
Hmm.
let me just read that last piece again. He answered one of them, I'm not being unfair to you, friend. Didn't you agree to work for a denarius? Take your pay and go. I want to give the one who was hired last the same as I gave you. Don't I have the right? So here's the question. Don't I have the right to do what I want with my own money? Or are you envious because I am generous? Okay. So let's compare this parable and let's compare this question with something out of the book of Jonah. Would someone be willing to read this short question, which is the very last sentence of Jonah?
Well, I'll go ahead and read that. I can do that.
Okay.
And should I not have concern for the great city of Nineveh, in which there are more than 120,000 people who cannot tell their right hand from their left, and also many animals?
Okay. So let me share some notes from the author of our course here that she offers as we look at comparing these two passages. So a denarius was the usual wage for a day of labor. The workers were paid at the end of each working day. They lived hand to mouth. There were no savings accounts. There were no 401ks. What they got for the day, the usual wage, they can arrive home with food for their families. Those who only get paid for fewer hours that they worked, would see their kids go to bed hungry. Paying the last hired takes nothing away from the others. They contracted for the wage and they got it, so they should leave. If the master has compassion on the last hired and their kids, what complaint does anyone have a right to? Okay, so let me get out of this. And okay, I don't see anybody trying to check in. Did you see any screens, Tina, that showed you who was? Okay.
I've been looking at the participants, but I haven't seen any of that admit one. So,
You were able to view participants?
yeah,
Oh, okay. Okay.
it kind of messes up the screen a bit, but.
Okay. Well, so we really ended up with two questions here. One was, in the case of Jesus' parable, don't I have the right to do what I want with my own money, or are you envious because I'm generous? The other is God saying, and should I not have a concern for the great city of Nineveh? So do you see threads in common between these two? Well, let me put it another way, not just a yes, no answer. What similarities do you see between this parable of the vineyard workers and the story of Jonah?
He was jealous because Jonah was jealous in a way because he'd been Jew all his life. He was faithful to God, one God. Nineveh was pretty much a godless area, and very much a godless area.
Mhm.
And he was wondering, why'd you save them when we've been holy and righteous all our days and for generations? But
So looking at the vineyard workers, do you think it was fair for the owner to pay somebody who only worked half an hour for the whole day? Was that fair to the other workers?
well, it depends on your point of view, you know?
If you're the first or last.
Mhm.
Well,
But the owner is the powerful, has the power, he has the money, he has the denarii. So that's where the power lies as far as that.
so given the comments that Carol Miller gave, those notes that I read to you about a denarius and a day's wage and all that, do you think the vineyard owner was justified because of what was he trying to accomplish? What do you think was his motive? Does her reasoning make sense? Is that a motive, or is he just a random giver, like paying for the person in line behind you at the drive-through?
Well, it kind of sounded like if he didn't pay those people that came in late, that their children wouldn't get fed that night.
Yeah.
Okay, so was this generosity? Was this trying to think how to word this, what his motive would be?
Wasn't he just taking care of them all, just like God took care of Nineveh?
It really feels like that, doesn't it? That
Mhm.
he really had a perspective on what would happen to everybody who had helped during the day. And that was more important to him than ticking off the people who had worked all day and were actually going to get exactly what they agreed to.
Mhm.
Or you could look at it, if they were wine grapes, from a more practical point of view. I mean, what if he knew that there was a storm coming? He had to get those grapes in. And maybe the only way he could get those last people to come and work is to promise them a denarius. I don't know.
Yeah.
He needed to do what he needed to do, and his whole thing maybe wasn't how fair it was. I mean, he figured it was fair because that's what the people had agreed to in the first place. But I don't think that's what this story is about, though. I had to
Well,
be the devil's advocate and throw that in.
well,
I mean, he was making a judgment between himself and each individual person. And why, and that's what the issue should be, is between himself and each individual person, and not comparing all the other people.
Right.
Yeah, and if you actually, from what I said, if you look at it as the vineyard owner being God, I mean, God has reasons for doing what he does, and we don't always know what they are.
Right.
And so
what's God's core motive for what God does? Based on Hesed.
Conditional.
Yeah. And
So do you think this parable is a defense of grace?
yeah, because I think it's more about grace instead of fairness, and grace isn't fair.
Mhm.
Well, it depends whether you're the person who worked all day or the one who came in at the last hour, right? But you're right. It's easy for us to see it from our own perspective
Mhm.
and say that that's not fair. Now we're beginning to sound like Jonah.
Yeah.
We're going to sit under a tree and say, just kill me. I don't even want to live. I don't like the way you operate, God. That's really what he was doing. He was really saying, I don't like your version of grace. That should only apply to me. And actually, do you think he did receive grace?
What happened after Nineveh was saved and he complained.
Well, he survived being spit out by a fish.
Yeah, but that was beforehand.
Well, I'm saying if you look at the whole story of Jonah, it seems like there were multiple examples
Yeah.
of,
And
But-
he was pretty mouthy to God, so I showed a lot of grace.
Awful mouthy.
yeah, that's for sure. I'd be afraid to talk like that, but anyways,
To God, yeah.
yeah.
Mhm. Well, and then from another perspective, the vineyard owner would certainly have cultivated some loyal workers by those who came last and got paid that full denarius, like the ones who had worked all day.
Yep.
If you want to put it that way.
Yeah.
Not, I mean, that would be, as far as, I guess, converts, the last should be first, the first last. No, that's not the right thing. But the kind of illustrates the workers who had gone all day and got the denarius for like the Jews that had been monotheistic for generations, and so they kind of took it for granted. And then the Nineveh folks who were all worshiping all the little household gods and everything.
Yeah.
And the sailors on the ship were converted by instantly by giving themselves to late in life, but maybe more sincerely, not they were converts rather than just going along with the flow for all their lives, because they didn't want to do anything different. I don't know.
Well, in the case of Jesus' parable, the setting seems like it's not an interracial, international kind
no.
of thing. It's probably all Jews. Jonah is a different situation in that Nineveh was the capital city of Assyria.
Yeah.
And as we studied at the last class, there was no love lost there. I mean, they were horrid and brutal captors. So the idea of loving our enemy, I mean, really, that's part of what God's mercy is about, right? I mean, it seems like part of the message we're really reading here in Jonah is that God loves all of creation, all humanity, and God wants to bring us all in and not kill each other off, but find a way to pull us all in so that we all recognize and honor who God is. And in the case of Jonah, they are the enemy.
Mhm.
And so that brings up this handout that I sent you, which was a little outline of what is just war theory.
Mm.
And I've certainly heard pieces of this before when I went down through what a just war, how it would be done and how it would be conducted. Under what circumstances is it a just war?
Mhm.
And then what are the honorable procedures that the two parties at war will honor. I've never seen it written up before, and I found it really, really interesting. For it to be a just war, it has to be waged by a legitimate authority. It has to reflect moral deliberation beforehand. It has to have probability of success. It has to have a just cause, and it needs to be in intent, be just in its intent. So it's not just to kill the enemy. There needs to be a just intent. And what do you think about all that? Does the concept of just war make sense to you? Because that's part of what this concept is part of what we're being challenged with, to really look at the situation of Jonah, of God saying, should I not have a concern for the great city of Nineveh? It's the capital of Assyria.
Mhm.
Should God have a great concern, have a concern for the great city of Nineveh? What are your thoughts?
God's concern is for all humanity. But Jonas obviously wasn't. And instead of being grateful to God for saving Nineveh, which seemed to be converted in 3 days, something like that.
Yeah, and a 5-word sermon.
Yeah. But Jonah was disappointed. I think he wanted to see a good fire and brimstone attack.
Right.
But-
Absolutely. I agree. Yeah. Well, I don't have an answer to this, and I think great thinkers and theologians through history haven't had a good answer for this. When we see horrible wrongs being done, it's pretty tough to sit back and just be a pacifist. I know some people do. They make that commitment to be a pacifist. But I think the idea of a just war is saying there's got to be some metric that says that this is being done not by just individuals who want to take over the world, but by legitimate authorities who are trying to do it for the right reason and use methods that are not out of proportion, and not aiming at non-combatants, for example, which is all part of this definition. This almost comical story of Jonah suddenly becomes very serious,
Mhm.
because it really is describing in the book of Jonah, really seeing the character of Jonah, not only ignoring God's will for Jonah, but for Jonah to really be guilty of saying, I don't like this God. I don't like the God whose mercy extends to everyone. I don't like this God whose grace could even be received by my enemy.
Mhm.
And so we're being asked a question here that I think is for us too. It's not just for Jonah. Should I not have concern for the great city of Nineveh? If grace was money, we go back to the question at the end of that parable in Matthew. Don't I have the right to do what I want with my own money? Money. Well, don't I have the right to do what I want with my grace? Wow. Wow. Yeah. So we end up having, let's see here if I, see, yes, Mark 12, that should be on my little handout sheet. It is. So there's one more thing I'd like to have someone read, if you would.
Can I make one more comment on these 5 things?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, let me not share yet. Yes.
To me, the biggest thing on these 5 things is for somebody to have the wisdom to make these 5 choices and say, oh, I don't just pick one of them. Is it for a just cause? To have somebody wise enough to say, this cause is just, or this cause is not just, or, you know, to make these kind of like really choices, you know, I think is really difficult to do. I mean,
Yes.
I mean, it's not kind of like, you know, I don't think I would be qualified to, you know, say, is this just or is this not just, or any of these things. These are all really tough choices that have to be made.
Right. So, but when you look at something like the extermination of the Jews in World War II, should the world sit back and watch it? It seems, I mean, it seems to me the answer is no, because it's so deeply ethically wrong that it has to be stopped. The only way it can be stopped is by war. So for there to not be such a thing as a just war bothers me too. I mean, it bothers me both ways. I agree with you completely. Who could really carry that heavy a load on their shoulders to say, I'm going to decide this is a just war and I'm going to commit our nation to war? I mean, in our democracy, we end up having to have Congress agree, right? It can't just be the president, right?
Well, we've had an awful lot of
Work around.
military actions or whatever it is that they call it. I mean, like Vietnam, the Congress never voted on that. And I think a lot of the other things Congress hasn't voted on. It was just done.
Even though wars that could be called a just war at the beginning got people got carried away, or leaders or whoever on whatever side, and forgot all about being just about either side or both sides. You know?
When you say that, I think about incidents in the Vietnam War of soldiers ending up, attacking civilians. I remember those stories. And so I guess that kind of points to what you're describing, that they almost let the power that they're carrying get out of control.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
And thinking back on other wars, they may have started with one side or the other thinking that we have to do this for this reason. And then they get carried away with power or with whatever and go, it seems like because they're humans, they go too far. A little power goes a long way. So, but anyway, it's heavy stuff.
Yeah, it really is. And I think the point, in fact, I know the point from the notes I have here, that the author of this study was really trying to have us give thought to, is that this is a lot bigger issue than showing love towards people we already have a friendship relationship with,
Mm.
and when we just have some kind of disagreement. This really affects, how we look at, the issue of war, and whether we feel that there is such a thing as a way to justify it. I don't, like I said, I don't have the answer. And I agree with David. I think that's a bigger issue that it's beyond my pay grade. And I would want to, though, think that there was a process within within our government, that it's not one person. It's a think tank that is filled with wise people who we're going to feel like, they made the decision that had to be made. When Tina, you share about Vietnam War, I wasn't aware of that, or I didn't remember it, I guess, that there was never actually any congressional agreement to go to war.
Yeah, it just kept being added to and passed on.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I remember that part.
But
Yeah.
I think it must be extremely difficult as a soldier to be expected to kill the enemy, and then at the same time sort of not cross over into dehumanizing the enemy. And that has been one of the ways that soldiers, I think, have coped with it, by finding some way to dehumanize the enemy, because and
Yes.
and so I guess we can't be too shocked when something horrible happens, because of the stresses of war and all of that happens, and what we're asking those people to do for us.
Very true. Very true. Okay, let me go to this shared document, and you'll remember it because it was the gospel lesson for a week ago. So that's the whole thing right there. Would someone be willing to read this? Okay, I'm going to open this window and I'm going to volunteer somebody. Let's see. Who can I volunteer? Reverend Artis has been very quiet.
Yes, she had.
She's nodding her
I'll be
head. I would appreciate that.
I'll
Thank
be
you.
happy to.
Thank you.
One of the teachers of law came and heard them debating. Noticing that Jesus had given them a good answer, he asked him, "Of all the commandments, which is the most important?" "The most important one," answered Jesus, "is this: Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and with all your strength. The second is this: love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these." "Well said, teacher," the man replied. "You are right in saying that God is one and there is no other but him. To love him with all your heart, with all your understanding, with all your strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself is more important than burnt offerings and sacrifices." When Jesus saw that he had answered wisely, he said to him, "You are not far from the kingdom of God." And from then on, no one dared ask him any more questions.
So, what is the most important thing that a human being can learn to do?
Love God and love your neighbor as yourself. There's a trick to that, though, in the fact that you have to love yourself. You
Mhm.
have to have an understanding of your relationship with God, and that you're loving yourself as God would love you before you can love your neighbor as yourself.
Right.
I totally agree. It also, I think, is saying to love God is not just about loving God, but loving how God acts, loving what God does and what God does not do,
Mhm.
Mhm.
loving the things we don't understand. If we're the person who worked in the vineyard all day and we just don't get it, are we going to love God anyways? Are we going to love the vineyard owner anyways? Because there must be something going on I don't know about.
Yeah.
I think that's what
The
the,
fact that
go ahead.
I was just going to say, the fact that the vineyard owner thought about the fact that if he didn't pay them, that their children would go hungry was probably not something that the other workers thought about.
Yep. Yep.
I think generosity was not a very common thing in those hard scrabble days in most generations. That hopefully the it gave the workers something to think about. You know.
Well, I think it's given me something to think about in the book of Jonah as well, because as I was saying earlier, it's a lot more intense, really, even than the parable, or at least it feels more intense, because I could really relate to the anger of Jonah over what kind of a nation Assyria was.
Mhm.
And here's Nineveh, the capital city. But what resulted? Well, what did God's grace produce in Nineveh? They turned themselves around, right?
Mhm.
So our loving somebody isn't conditional upon our saying, well, um, I need them to believe in God first, because it might be that the process of accepting them is part of the conversion process.
Mhm.
And I think I've seen that in my own life with people I've talked with, who, they felt like they had to have some certain combination of secret knowledge or have some special prayer said over them that they would finally get it. And the real truth of the matter is that it's God who does that to us, right? Our faith is a gift from God that we have to decide whether to accept. It's not like there's a secret prayer that only clergy are taught, right, Tina? We never got that.
Mhm.
Yeah, we were never offered that course. And so, we can ask that person to be open, and we can ask God to open the window for them so they can see, what needs to be done. But part of what breaks my heart about what's been going on in this country recently is saying, well, if I don't agree with somebody, if it is somebody who I feel really is even ethically wrong, um, I should destroy them. And I just can't go there. my my belief in God it just doesn't let me go in that place. That if somebody has a different position on all these issues we've been reading about for the election. Does that mean we hate that person, or does it mean that we still love them, and we try to reflect the reason we think the way we do in an honoring way? I don't know. What are your thoughts on what you have learned from Jonah? What has this informed you about regarding, accepting, not just loving God, not just that word, love the Lord your God, but of loving how God behaves, loving how God works?
He doesn't give up.
That's true. Good thing, huh?
Yeah, Jonah fought him the whole time, even though God was trying to give Jonah the message that and you help him to see, for heaven's sakes, God, I'm God. You're not. I made
Right.
everything. Shouldn't I love all these people? And Jonah fought him tooth and nail. The storm at sea, the fish, the burning sun, and the dead plant, and
Yeah.
the whole thing. And he just fought him all the way. And I'd like to know what came after chapter 4, particularly. And what kind of a story Jonah told when he got back to Tarshish.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, the thought I was having is that to contrast Jonah a little bit with how dogs interact with the world, or how plants interact with the world. Neither of those two things are, going and killing somebody else or hurting somebody else. Like dogs pretty much accept everything. And plants, they don't go around killing things. They just sort of, accept the world as it appears to them.
Yeah.
With very little judgment in either of those two things.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I think none of us really want God to be fair when it comes right down to it.
When it comes to what? I didn't hear what you said.
Well, when it comes right down to it, when we really think about ourselves,
Mhm.
we want God to be loving and gracious and go easy on us.
On us, yeah.
Yeah. But when we really stop to think about that, it's that's why I always like the part in the Lord's Prayer that says, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive others.
Those who
And I
trespass
think sometimes
against
we
us.
say that so fast, we just skirt right by what it's telling us.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the part to speed read.
Mm.
Well, I just well, I'd like to hear from others of you as we wrap up here this study of Jonah, about what you reaped out of this 4 sessions that we spent on this. If I could just get have you share some thoughts about whether it opened up any new ideas, or whether you liked it better just being a fish story. Or what your thoughts are about the message of this book.
Well, I think I always thought that Jonah was the main character of the book and had supposedly the closest relationship with God. But when it came to God forgiving, just like with the sailors. He took care of the sailors before he took care of Jonah. So that was just interesting to me that I hadn't really thought about before. That and the sailors were trying to be nice right from the beginning. They didn't really want to throw Jonah overboard, but they could see that was the only way to save themselves. So I think I was thinking about what Tina said. How I understood what you said, Tina, was to say sometimes we don't want God to always have grace on other people as much as they have grace on us. Was that right?
Yeah, that's right. But a lot
I
of
can't
times
see you. So
I think a lot of times we're not thinking about that at the moment that we're begrudging grace to somebody else.
No.
You know, we
right.
stop to think, hey, it works both ways.
Mhm.
Right. But I don't think Jonah ever thought that it worked both ways.
Mm-mm.
I could never see Jonah. Jonah reminded me of the older brother in the story of the prodigal son, that he was irritated by the whole situation from beginning to end. It didn't really matter what anybody said. He was still irritated. And he was irritated with his dad. He was irritated with his brother. He was irritated with the other people. And that's how I felt like Jonah never stopped being irritated, even to the very end of the story.
Probably well into chapter 5, as Beth was saying, or Pat was saying. Yeah, he never really got it. Yeah. Anybody else thoughts about this whole study?
Well, I liked, you know, especially tonight when we sort of saw the links between what we were learning in the New Testament and how the themes were similar to what was happening in the story of Jonah.
Mhm.
So because I don't think I would have seen it otherwise.
I think so many of us have heard the children's story of Jonah. We hear the Jonah and the whale story, or Jonah and the big fish, and we don't hear the fine details or understand that it was Jonah's fault. He did this to himself partly because he would
Yeah.
learn a lesson. He was bucking God all the way.
Well, he never really truly loved God, did he? I guess he loved the idea of there being a God, but like Tina was saying, it needed to be Jonah's kind of God.
Mhm. Yeah.
Some other notes from Carol Miller and my leader notes. Jonah would do well to remember that God's people were chosen to serve God by serving the world, the nations. Words in the Bible that stand for all of those who are not like us. We exist for them to make the nature of God visible to the world. And it seems like this really has given us a study that was surprising to me, that this actually teaches us something kind of uncomfortable, but also just helps us get a better sense of what the nature of God is. That this has said, this undeserved, always available, unconditional love of God is for everybody. And so that means, God wants us to please God, honor God by the way we live our lives. So if somebody's really, a horrific person, then God has the power to convert them, like God did to Nineveh, right? So there is that prayer we have as followers that, there'll be a day that all is put right.
Mhm.
Yeah. All right. Well, that was the conclusion. This is the conclusion of our study. And I really, really appreciate the conversations that we've had here. I've gotten a lot out of this that I did not expect to get. And I just feel like the timing is God's time for us to be taking this course, because I really see a country that really was mostly Christian-based founders of this country, that this country is really struggling with a lot of these core issues of whether they really love what God is about, and whether they really do have a sense of, being representatives of God's grace, of being people who are trying to help the world understand, or the differing sides of these controversies that are going on, to understand, where is God's grace in all that, folks? You need to make room for God's grace. I would love to have a way for everybody in this country to go through the study we just went through with Jonah. I just feel like it has such an important message that too many people have lost. And
Mhm.
well, I guess we just need to pray. I hope you all have voted. If you need anybody to take your ballot to a drop-off site, let me know. I'm happy to sign on the dotted line and take it for you to a drop-off point. This definitely is, I have to agree with a comment of one of the people running. Part of this election is about the soul of the country. And it has, I think, everything to do what we've been studying here. So again, I really appreciate your taking the time, and thanks for coming back on Tuesday.
Well, I hope you're dry at home.
It is dry now. I don't have the bill yet, but we had to get a new water heater, and it got installed today. So I put away the bucket and wrung out the sponge that I've been using for the last 24 hours. Yeah, it's been a little crazy, but so any of you planning? Let's see. I know Pat, you made known that you're planning to be at the Sunday service in person. Okay, great. And Rose, I know you're going to be there, right? And Reverend Artis, I'm not sure. Were you going to be there?
Yes, I'm going to be there.
Okay. I wasn't positive what the final. And Carol, you going to be there?
No.
Okay. All right. Well, we are going to be recording it. That's part of what
That's good.
the craziness factor is in my brain, that I'm trying to figure out, the requirement of video and audio and the different things that have to be piped in audio. And I did get confirmation though today that Heidi and James and David are going to be there. So the music team will be there. And they pushed back a little bit about instrumental. And I said, this isn't negotiable, because I'm not the one who's making this up. This is from administratively above. It's not God ordained, but it's it's further up the ladder than I am, who is saying, "Thou shalt not sing." So I figure though we can hum under a mask, right? And,
Sure.
yeah. So, but I think it's really going to be a great service. And if any of you again has not sent me any names that you would like in the necrology book to be read at that All Saints service, please send me an email and let me know names that you would like to have placed in there. So, if you're not
I keep thinking of more, so I'll have Beth send you another email.
sure. Yeah, I did get the first one and I acknowledged it. So yeah, that's fine. That's exactly why the book is there. If folks are on your mind and in your heart this year especially, then please just make sure I get the names. And so, all right. Well, I'll let you get on with your Tuesday evening. And thank you again. It's really just been a lot of fun for me to be able to lead these studies of Jonah. And I think the next event coming up is an Advent journey, isn't it, Reverend Artis?
Super.
Yes, and we're
Okay.
gonna make wreaths.
Mm,
I have planned for us, a way for us to make wreaths that can be made partially at home and maybe one evening together or one afternoon together.
Okay. So we're not talking virtual wreaths here. These are real wreaths.
These are real.
super.
Mhm.
Very, very
Yeah.
good. Okay. All right. Well, good. So we'll be getting information out. Let's see, we're almost at November 1st. So within
Yes.
the next couple weeks, we'll get information out to people on dates and how they can
Uh-huh.
Right.
how they can hook into your journey.
Mhm.
Okay. All
I will
right.
presume we will need to do,
Mm.
Oh, we lost your audio. Can you say that again?
I would presume that we will need to do it just like this.
Mhm.
We will have, it will have to be Zoom. The journey will have to be a Zoom event, just like we're doing now. But the wreaths will be a different situation.
Okay. No problem. No problem at all. I'm getting better at this Zoom stuff.
Good. Thank goodness the rest of us are
Good.
having to follow your directions, so I'm glad you're getting better.
Well, you know, one of the things I learned in this study class, I think the very first session, I tried to have us say a prayer together, and there's enough delay over the internet. We all ended up saying it at different times. It sounded like what Pentecost Day must have sounded like. And so what I tried to do since that is just ask one person to read and the rest of us to follow along. And I mean, from my perspective here, it seems much better, isn't it?
Mhm.
Okay,
Yep.
so I'm going to keep doing it that way. But I was thinking for the journeys, Reverend Artis, you and I can meet to discuss that, because if there's a way that I can electrically or electronically pump in the music that you play, I could do that. We can discuss whether we would do it recorded or live. There might be a way to do it live.
We
There
can
might,
sing on Zoom.
we can,
Right.
yeah, we can sing. It's just, it does the same thing as the prayers did, is everybody's out of sync, and it really, I don't know. So far, I haven't seen that works, but you know, there must be a way now that you say that, because I've seen choirs where each of the choir members is in their own home, but they end up singing all in unison, and it sounds great. So okay, maybe there's some
A lot
technical.
of work, though. I've heard from people that have done that.
You each have to be your own host.
You each
Yeah.
have to be your own host, Beth says,
Oh, okay.
but
All
then.
Wow. Okay, I'm not going to keep you any
We'll
longer.
figure,
Yeah, we will. We'll figure it out, and it's going to be awesome. Okay.
Right.
All right. Well, God bless
Okay.
you all, and thank you again, and we'll see you soon.
You too.
Thank you.
Okay,
thank
bye.
you.
All of